This is Kent Hance, best storyteller in Texas. I've got Congressman Roger Williams on with us today. He is a dear friend and a friend of long standing, and he's a TCU guy, serves on their board. He played baseball there. And one thing, Congressman, I want you to talk just a little about. You're the only person I know or know of that's shaken the hand of every president from Truman to Trump, and there's 14 in there. You started early.
Well, I shook the hand of Harry Truman. It would have been 1955. Of course, he was former President Truman then, but had a Kansas City A's baseball game when they moved from Philadelphia to Kansas City, and he threw the first pitch out, and after that, they sat him in a lawn chair under the bleachers, and everybody lined up to shake his hand during the game, and my dad held my hand, and I got to shake Harry Truman's hand when we got up to the front row, and I knew who he was. I remember he had those white shoes on that you always see him wearing, but that's how I shook his hand. And then I shook the hand of Dwight Eisenhower in the same venue. He threw the first pitch out in Kansas City in I think it was 57 or 58. I got to shake his hand. My dad, he was president, yes. And then at the time, I shook his hand at the time he was president. And then after him, of course, we had John Kennedy. And it's a longer story. I won't bother you listeners with that, but I shook his hand at 10:42 in the morning on November 22nd, and he was killed at 12:42, 2 hours later in Dallas. But I shook his hand when he spoke in Fort Worth at the Chamber of Commerce Bank breakfast that morning, and shook his hand. I remember they came and got my mother and took us. It was rearranged. Jim Wright, the former Congressman, Speaker of the House, arranged for my mother and I to meet the president. And right after he spoke, we were taken to an area, and Mrs. Kennedy came and shook my mother's hand and stood next to me, and the president came. He took a puff out of a cigar and put it in a sand urn and shook my mother's hand, shook my hand, looked back at my mother and said, "You got a good-looking young man here." So I remember that, though, like it was yesterday, as you do too, right? It was just yesterday that seemed like it happened. And then, of course, Lyndon Johnson, I shook his hand actually several times. He actually was a friend of my father's. So I got to meet him. And then we had a president named Richard Nixon. And I met Nixon when I was playing with the Atlanta Braves. He came down to spring training in 74 or 72. He came down to spring training because he wanted to get his picture taken with Hank Aaron, the home run king. And he came to each one of our lockers and shook our hand and went and stood in the middle of the clubhouse and said the only job he'd changed for being president was being commissioner of baseball because it paid $100,000 a year. I remember him saying that. And that was all the money in the world back in 72. So I got to meet him. And then Gerald Ford, I got to play golf with him a couple of times up in Sun Valley, Idaho with my friend Harmon Killebrew. And Gerald Ford was as bad as everybody says he was in golf. He could literally, he could hit a ball sideways. And only person I ever knew that could do that, Jack Nicklaus, couldn't even do that. But he hit it sideways, and you had to be in a special spot to defend yourself from his tee shot. But I got to play golf with him, and met Jimmy Carter when I was running on a Sunday morning on the TCU campus. I was running Sunday morning, ran by the Christian church, and police were everywhere, and people were standing everywhere, and I didn't even have a shirt on. I was running without a shirt. And I saw the sheriff of Tarrant County, Lon Evans, was standing at the front door of the church. And I went up there and said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, if you'll stay here, I'll introduce you to President Carter." So the doors opened. He shook sheriff's hand, thanked him for the security, shook my hand. I didn't have a shirt on. I don't know if he thought I was a waiter or what, but he shook my hand. I got to meet him. And then, of course, Ronald Reagan came to Fort Worth several times. I got to meet him because my dad had somewhat of a relationship with him. But my dad, when he spoke in 76, is when I first met him, when he was running for president, my dad was the master of ceremonies at the dinner that night at the Texas Hotel, and my dad gave him a jackalope for coming across between a jackrabbit and an antelope. You know about those in West Texas. You know, they happen there, and you only see them at night anyway. You know that. Dry Gulch is where they kind of hang out. But Dad had a doe and a buck, and he gave Ronald Reagan that after speaking. So I got to meet him through my father in the jackalope. And then George H.W. Bush, who we all got to meet, became a great friend and a confidant of mine, somebody I dearly loved. And then after him was Bill Clinton. I met Bill Clinton in Fort Worth, and I gave him a pair of Justin boots. He spoke in Fort Worth one day downtown, and I presented him with a pair of Justin boots. I don't know if he ever wore them or not, but maybe he did. And then, of course, our good friend President George W. Bush was a dear friend, like he is a dear friend of yours, and we share baseball together and some other things, and the Rangers, and so it was great meeting him. And then, of course, I got to meet President Obama when he came to speak to Republicans after he won in the Capitol to remind us that he won the election, that we didn't. And I remember when he said that, I raised my hand and said, "Sir, I got to tell you, where I come from, you didn't win the election." And he said, "Well, you must be from Texas." I said, "That's where I'm from." And then after him, I met Joe Biden when I was managing the congressional baseball game. And in the fourth inning, the Secret Service came over and said, "The President would like to come see you." So he came over, and I introduced myself to him. I said, "I'm Roger Williams from Texas." He said, "I know who you are." And I said, "Mr. President, please don't raise taxes." I said this in the middle of the game. And about that time, one of our guys hit a home run, and he was taking the trot, and everybody was cheering. And President Biden thought they were cheering for him, but they were really cheering for Stubby, who hit a home run for the Republicans. And then, of course, Donald Trump, who I serve under now, get to see him many times and shake his hand several times. But anyway, that's kind of the story of the presidents. I remember each and every one of them, and it's an honor to have shook their hand. And people ask me who had the firmest handshake of all. Most memorable handshake is Trump's, because he has a retail handshake. He'll shake your hand and try to pull you off your feet. But George H.W. Bush had the strongest handshake. He had a firm handshake, and really, when you shook his hand, he was giving you the attention that a lot of people don't get. So that's kind of my story on Truman to Trump. And if you ever become president, I can tell him I shook your hand.
I don't think that's going to happen. I think back to, you're chairman of the Small Business Administration Committee in Congress, and Texas has 3 chairmen, I believe, in this session of the Congress in the House. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, who we got? We got me. We got Jody Arrington on budget. You got Brian Babin, Dr. Babin, space and technology, sharing chairmanships with Jody, and Babin is a good deal. We converse a lot.
But one thing that's so important about you being a chairman is the chairmen meet together, just the chairman, once a week or once every 2 weeks. So if you've got something in your district that's a problem, and Ways and Means can fix it, or budget, or appropriations, whoever, you have a personal relationship, a close personal relationship with all the other chairmen. And people don't realize how close those chairmen are.
No, that's a good point. And, every Monday at 3:00 that we have that meeting, and it's chaired by Steve Scalise, our leader. And we sit across a boardroom type table, just like you talked about, because you've been there. And we talk about what's ahead for our committees, what we're going to do this particular week in our committees, what we can do to help the other committees, where we are in certain legislation that's flowing through the House, and so forth. So it's communications, but it also drills it down, because when you are a committee chair, like the 3 of us are, we not only represent our district, but we represent our country, and so forth.
Right.
So, in my case, Main Street America is everywhere, and I'm liable to be going to Kansas City or somewhere else to speak to business leaders, whatever. But we represent our district, but we get to represent America, and that's a huge honor.
Sure. One thing that I look back in your background, you played baseball, but that intrigues me. You were friends with Ted Williams, who I think is the greatest hitter of all time that played baseball. And also you were friends with Bob Knight, who was the basketball coach at Indiana and at Texas Tech, and you were close personal friends of him. I also invited you when I was chancellor at Texas Tech to speak at graduation, and you did an outstanding job.
Well, I remember that day because you were so sweet to ask me to come, and I've got the best graduation message. As you know, number one, it's short. Number two, it talks about giving back to your school. Number three, we talk baseball, and then we get out of there. And you let me do that. But what I remember, and I tell everybody, is I think the number, does this sound right, that we would have had 800 in the morning and 800 in the afternoon, about 1,600 kids graduating. And I was sitting next to you, and we finished with the first 800, and you said to me, let's go down and shake their hands. So you and I went down there and shook 800 hands, but the first guy that shook your hand, you asked him, hey, when you make that first million, I want it coming to Texas Tech. And I was asking him to vote for me. We did that 1,600 times, and I remember one kid finally said to you, he said, Chancellor, do you mind if I get out of the building before you start asking me for money, please? And so I remember that. That was a big honor to come speak there. And then Knight was a good friend of mine. I'd met Knight back in 72, 73. We playing in golf tournaments together. And of course, he was your great basketball coach, helped put Texas Tech in the level that they're in now from a basketball standpoint. But I would go, before he came to Tech, I'd go to Indiana and sit on the bench with him and watch him coach. And he was one of a kind, I'll tell you. And players loved playing for him. And then Ted Williams, I mean, when you're our age and you're growing up in the 50s, you're either Ted Williams or Mickey Mantle in your backyard. So Ted Williams was somebody I idoled. And in 1969, he was managing the Washington Senators, and they came to Dallas. They came to Arlington, Texas, where the Dallas-Fort Worth Spurs played, the minor league team. And they came with the Montreal Expos to play in an exhibition game. And a guy named Bobby Bragan, who you knew, got me out of school at TCU. I was a sophomore, and I just had a really good year at TCU. Jerry Haggard from Texas Tech and I battled it out for the conference batting title in the Southwest Conference. And as a reward, Mr. Bragan came to get me and said, let's go see Ted Williams at the Spurs Stadium. So we get down there, and the Senators are taking batting practice, and he's there watching them, and we get up there, and Bobby Bragan says, Ted, this is the next greatest Hall of Famer, Roger Williams. He wants to say hello to you. And I couldn't even tell you my name. I was so nervous. I shook his hand. It was a big old hand. And he shook my hand. Then he asked me a question. He said, are you a good hitter? And I said, yes, sir, I am a good hitter. He said, well, let me ask you, when you're up there, can you see the ball hit the bat? Well, look I know the answer to that. You know the answer to that. But the hell, I'm talking to Ted Williams. So I said, yes, sir, I can. I can see the ball hit the bat. And he goes, well, I'll be darned. I've been in this business 50 years and never seen the ball hit the bat. And he was right, but totally put me down big time. 2 years later, I'm with the Atlanta Braves. We're playing the Rangers, and I see Ted, and I go up to him. He didn't know me from Adam. I said, hey, Ted, can you see the ball hit the bat? He said, oh, no, you can't see it. These kids think you can, but you lose sight of it 3 foot out. It's hand-eye coordination. I said, well, you did that to me 2 years ago in an exhibition game. I just want to remind you. So, but let me tell you, he was a great hitter. He was the greatest hitter. He had it to an art. He did a lot. He raised a lot of money for a fund called the Jimmy Fund to help young children fight leukemia. And he was so well respected by everybody. And everybody would agree that he probably was the greatest hitter that baseball has seen. And I remember, I would have loved to heard it, but there's a great picture of he and Ty Cobb talking about hitting. I would have loved to heard what that was all about.
Ty Cobb and hitting and stealing bases.
Yeah, and you could do it, and you steal with your spikes up. He was a sad story, he never had, he had no offspring, and when he died, he was one of the largest shareholders in Coca-Cola. All that money went to the federal government, because he was in Atlanta when Coca-Cola kind of got started, and he was the man, so I guess a lot of people gave him stock and so forth, so it was kind of a sad story, but Ty Cobb was, he was the Babe Ruth before Babe Ruth.
Congressman, let me hear your perspective on what's happened as far as the college players are concerned. They're getting paid now, and some of them getting the millions. And what do you see Is that going to continue? Is Congress going to pass something that limits it, or what do you think the members of Congress are going to do?
Well, I don't know that Congress is going to do anything. Your great Red Raider Cody Campbell's doing a lot of work on it, and I'm doing a lot of work on it. We're concerned about keeping our schools in the hunt, but I don't know if Congress is going to do anything. We got some bills out there, but they're not satisfactory. They many of them take care of the Big Ten and and the Southeast Conference, but not the Big 12 schools. And you got a lot of other sports too that you got to consider: women's sports and Olympic sports. What's going to happen with them? So I don't know that Congress has a role running college athletics. To be quite frank with you, I mean we have a problem running Congress. Period up here, I'm not so sure what's going to happen. I will tell you this: I think nothing might be what's going to happen. Because on the other side, there's a lot of people that want to organize college athletics through labor unions. That's not going to fly, but the Democrats want that to be part of a solution, and that will never happen. So I don't know. We got so many other things happening up here right now. This may take a back seat, but college athletics certainly, I think you'd agree, Chancellor, is not anything like it was when you and I were growing up, what we were used to. But so I don't know what role Congress needs to be played. Everybody's got an idea, but I would tell you, one of the things we need to do with these kids, a lot of them do not know the value of money. They don't know the value of a dollar or what to do. Need to do a better job in training them on what to do with this money they get. There's a lot of things out there. At the end of the day, we got to make sure the student athlete is the one that wins through this, and not someone or somebody else or even an agent. They all seem to have agents now. So I don't know what we're going to do in Congress. Cody and I are working on some various things. But the way I feel about it is I'm not so sure there's a role for Congress in there.
In your various campaigns, you've never had really a close race, but one time you had a certain part of Austin, and that vote came in first, and you were way behind, and you had downtown Austin. I called you, and you said, it's okay, my votes hadn't been counted yet, and you won substantially.
Yeah, we were down 18,000 votes about 9:30 on election night, but like you and I talked about, we could see that a lot of what had come in early was the Austin vote, but we picked it up and all around the rest of the district and got as high as some 80% in some areas. So we won that one, and we fortunately, or thanks to the voters, we haven't been in that close of a race again. I think it's because people like our politics, and we're happy and we're not angry.
Yeah, you always have a positive attitude, and also you represent your district. You vote your district. You know it's a conservative district. You represent their views.
Well, and just what you got to do. I tell people when they come here, vote your district, vote your conscience, and you won't have any problems when you get up here in Congress. And don't try to be all things to all people. Believe in your core values, and like you say, vote your district. They're who elected you, and remember that.
Yeah. You're of old school. You still think you work for the voters, and I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can only vote one time. They can vote 1,000,000 times.
Yeah.
And that's who you do work for. And we have when you come into my office, you've seen it. We got a big sign out front that says this office belongs to the people of Texas, and that's true.
Right. What's the most unusual campaign event that you've ever attended, or the most unusual thing happen in a campaign to you?
Well, that's a good question. I remember I spoke. I was speaking. I think it was Eastland. You know where I'm talking about?
Cisco
the great
and
city of
Ranger,
Eastland.
right down there by Cisco and Ranger.
They're right there. Yeah, and they had asked me to come and speak to their business community about a Washington report. And I was talking about taxes. I was talking about regulations. I was talking about the border. I was talking about all these things that concern people. And we opened up for Q&A, questions and answers. And pretty good crowd, lady in the back. I'd been talking about taxes and regulations and all this. And lady in the back raised her hand. I called on her. Her question was this. She said, what are you going to do about all them hogs? And I said, that's a state issue. But we need to get rid of them, and we're working on it, and I'll do what I can to do my part so you can feel comfortable with your land and what you're growing on it. So that was kind of different. I thought I'd hit home with everybody, but with her, she was thinking about them hogs.
to her, that was the issue. She didn't care about those other issues.
No, she didn't care, and I guess I should have thought more about it, but I guess that was one thing that comes to mind that was kind of and I went up to her after the event, we hugged, and I told her I'll do everything I can because I got some hogs on my place too, but, anyway, it actually was kinda funny and cute, and she's been a great supporter ever since.
You served as Secretary of State in the state of Texas at one time. And how did you adjust to that job? You'd been in the retail business. You and
Yeah.
your dad had been in the automobile business. He goes back to what, 1939?
Yeah, 39. But
And
when
then,
I became Secretary of State go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, I would just tell us about Secretary of State.
Yeah, well, it was I tell people it might have been the best job I've ever had. I mean, it was just like being in business because, in my world, I've been in the automobile business. I sold a car, you've had to drive the car. I wanted to give you the best deal I could. I wanted to get you to buy it and take it. And when I became Secretary of State, Governor Perry and I, we went all over the country selling Texas to America. And it was easy and it was fun. And he charged me he said, Roger, go out and bring businesses to Texas. So I found myself selling Texas values, selling no personal income tax. And all we did was sell, sell, sell. We started a group called Texas One, which is business leaders all over the country, that they would come to Austin and we would go all over America, taking our selling tools to business. And we even had boots made up by Justin Boot that had Texas One logo on them. And we'd go into an office of a bunch of people in New York or California, and I'd give them a pair of boots and put them on the table as we talked. And we made deals. And I remember there was a deal we were dealing with a company called Newlywed Foods in Chicago, and they were thinking about coming to Texas, and we got down to where they wanted a little kick, a little signing bonus. And I called the Governor Perry from the bathroom in this guy's hotel room and said, I need a little money for a signing bonus. He said, do it. We gave it to him, and they moved a bunch of people down to Amarillo, and I think they're still there, the Newlywed plant. And so those kind of things was great. It was fun because we were the best. We knew we were the best. We had the assets to offer people. So it was a great job. I loved doing it and loved serving under Governor Perry.
You served as president of the Eagles, the
Yeah.
Republican Eagles, which are a group of people that give money and help candidates win. And we were at a convention in New York, and I think that was 2000 or maybe 96. And I came in the hotel, and I was supposed to speak to a group called the Top 100. And I saw you, and you said, well, come on in. I want you to speak. Well, I thought it was the group that I was supposed to be speaking to. And you got in there and gave me a great introduction, and it went well. I came out, and the people from the Team 100 were downstairs looking for me because I didn't show up for my speech upstairs. I thought it was with you, and you did such a good job introducing me. We got them really going that when I got through, they gave me a standing ovation. Of course, they
Mhm.
could have been that I was through. That's what they were standing about.
They
But
were
that was
leaving.
pretty fun.
Well, that was a great moment. I think it was New York is where it was,
It's
and
in New York,
I
yeah.
yeah, I chaired the Eagles, as you said, a donor level, and the Team 100 was a little higher donor level, and I was short a speaker. I'd already said everything I could say to the group, and I saw you out there. I said, "Come in and talk to my group," and you did a fantastic job like you always do. You did get a standing ovation, and then I kinda let you out to dry because when you were finished with me, you walked out by yourself, and they grabbed you and said, "Where the heck have you been?" And you said, "I've been speaking to the Eagles." You said, "Well, we were supposed to be speaking to the Team 100." So that was in a way my fault, and after all these years, I'll go on record today saying I'm sorry I did that to you.
Well, it was hilarious that I thought I was in the right place at the right time, and I was
Well,
the wrong place at the wrong time.
but you were in the right place at the right time for me.
Yeah, you took good care of me. It was fun, but I always when I go in to speak or something, I always look and see if it's posted out
Yeah.
there who's supposed to be speaking and what the group is.
Things can happen to you. When I was Secretary of State, I had to give the breakfast speech to the Corpus Christi Chamber. And I was to give the breakfast speech to the Corpus Christi Chamber, then get on a King Air airplane that the state owned. Do you remember those?
Right.
And fly to Amarillo for the Amarillo Chamber luncheon. So Corpus to Amarillo. So when I gave my speech in Corpus, I was at the airport and saw a buddy of mine. He said hello to me, and I was in a hurry trying to get on that plane and get to Amarillo. And I gave him my card. I said, "Call me one day." Well, so we got to Amarillo, and I got introduced to the Amarillo Chamber, and I reached in my pocket to get my remarks on a business card. Is all I do. I put my remarks on a business card, and I pulled my business card out, and I saw that the business card I had was the Corpus Christi speech, and I'd given the guy the Amarillo speech when I saw him in the airport. So there I was in Amarillo with a Corpus Christi speech. I had to adjust. I told him, I said, "I'm going to give you the Corpus Christi speech, and I'm going to insert the words Amarillo when I get to Corpus Christi." And we did it that way. We adjusted like you have to do. And I got a standing ovation. So you never know when you're going to be able to come through like you did, see? So you don't want to give the Corpus Christi speech to Amarillo, Texas.
But you had the right words though for Amarillo when you needed them. That's pretty good. I had not heard that.
Yeah, when I got to Corpus Christi, I said Amarillo. But it's like I read that story about Lyndon Johnson when he became president, give his first State of the Union address. You probably heard this story, but he had a young girl from Texas. They'd given the job to write the State of the Union address for the president. She did. She brought it in for him to look at, and he started reading it, and there were a lot of words there. He didn't know what they meant, and he said, "Honey, these people aren't going to understand what these words are." And so he went back and he X'd out every one of the words he didn't know what they meant. And he wrote in on each one of those X's, "My dear old daddy said." So if he got to a word he didn't know what it meant, he just said, "My dear old daddy said." And then he just went on about his speech. Worked out pretty good. So up in my office, if we have a word I don't understand, I just say, "My dear old daddy said," and we move on.
It's pretty good. You were a tireless campaigner and still are. And you enjoy, there's a lot of people that you see that do not enjoy campaigning. But you enjoy it and make people feel the feelings you have of being with them.
Well, and I'm talking to the expert when I'm talking to you. I mean that, but it's called being retail, right? I mean, how many times do you have to sell yourself every day? And a lot of people don't understand that. And, when you're campaigning, you're having to sell yourself.
Right.
You're having to sell your message. You're having to sell what you believe in. And when you were leading the great Texas Tech University, you were selling Red Raider, you were selling black, you were selling red, you were selling, and a lot of people never sell. And if they get in this business of politics, if they don't like people and they don't know how to sell, they will not win, period. And you have to be able to respond. You have to have a smile on your face. My dad always told me that it takes like 45 muscles to frown and 12 to smile. And you need to smile. You need to have a message. You need to call people by name. A lot of people don't remember names. You got to call people by name. You got to talk in terms of their interest, and you got to be able to listen to them. 2 ears and 1 mouth. If you do all that, you're going to win.
We really appreciate you being on today, and appreciate you giving your time. We've got a lot of people that listen and listen to your congressional district. They're always glad to hear from Roger Williams.
Well, I want to thank you for having me on. You are a dear friend of mine. You are somebody I've always looked up to. As they say, you get it. And I appreciate you. Tell your family hi. Guns up and go Frogs.